Welcome to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock. In every episode, Mark interviews others to share stories of thought leaders who inspire others by making a difference. You can find this show on www.videosocials.net and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now here's the host of Inspiring Business, Mark Bullock.
Welcome. And I'm so excited today because my guest is my friend and client, Katherine Miller. And Katherine is the founder of the Miller Law Group, where they focus on family law, including mediation, collaborative law, and divorce law. Basically, any issue where law and family meet. Welcome, Katherine. How are you?
I'm well, Mark, and thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's really all my pleasure, and you know the fact of the matter is that you're far more experienced in doing interviews than I am. I think I've done about a dozen of these, and I'm sure you've done many times that. But so thank you, and I'm so excited to have you, kind of because you're a divorce attorney, but you're not just a divorce attorney, and I've seen you in our video socials groups. I've seen many of the videos that you've created. You've been a client for years with our phone blogger service as well as video socials, and I've seen a side of you that is not typical amongst a divorce attorney or somebody that focuses purely on divorce law. And one of the reasons that I wanted you on this podcast is because I know that behind the scenes, you really want to make a difference. You really want to help people through a very, very difficult process. But how did this come to be? How did you come to be where you are now, and what is your focus right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me just start out by saying that I'm on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And that dignity aspect we apply that not just to divorce, but to prenups, to estate planning, to family formation, and any area really that involves the law and the family. And so how did that happen? Well, it's a little bit of a story, so bear with me for a minute or two. I come from a family of therapists, but I went to law school because, first of all, I thought I was too bossy to be a therapist. And it turns out that you can be a bossy therapist, but I didn't know that at the time, and that's not the tradition that my family was in. And so I was interested in justice. I've always been interested in justice, and so I went to law school. And I realized in the orientation week that that's not what law school was going to be about, and in fact, that's not what the practice of law is mostly about. And so I've always been interested in people, and so I decided to focus my career on the law and the family. And I also come from a family where family is very important. And so as an example, my grandmother said to me a couple of weeks before I got married for the first time, so a little preview of the end of the story, that I could never get divorced. And it was ironic because I was a divorce lawyer at the time. She said, Katherine, you can never get divorced. And I'm like, what are you talking about? If I'm not happy, I'm going to get divorced. And she said, no, you can never get divorced because family comes first. And what she meant was that no matter what I had to do to twist myself into a pretzel to stay married, I had to do that. Drinking, having affairs, becoming a drug addict, whatever it was, I needed to do that because family comes first. And, I was, many years later, the first person in my family to get divorced. And that was a really formative piece of my journey. But let me just back up a little bit. So I started as out of law school, unmarried, in the family law firm. And after a couple of years of practicing, our practice was half matrimonial litigation, divorce law, and half child welfare litigation. So I was in court a lot. I mean, really, I tried many, many cases in front of Judge Judy, to give you an example, when she was on the bench in the New York Family Court, New York City Family Court. And but just to give you a taste of it, right? And after a couple of years of that, I said, wow, there has to be a better way to help these families resolve conflict. And so I took a mediation training. And I started to try to integrate those mediative ideas of settling based on what was important to the people rather than the legal concepts. And, they're similar, but different in some ways. And in every single case, I ran into the same problem. And that problem was the other lawyer. And it wasn't that the other lawyers were bad people or bad lawyers. They were quite good and well-intentioned lawyers. But we just couldn't get on the same page about what criteria we were going to use to help these families resolve the conflict of the divorce and move through to a post-divorce lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for about 10 years. It was extremely frustrating. Then I got divorced myself. My grandmother had passed away, so I didn't have to explain to her why I was making this choice. And after that experience of being the client, and my husband and I were able to settle outside the courtroom in a very collaborative setting in a conference room, and I credit his lawyer with doing a lot of work to get our settlement through in a very quick and very creative way. After that, I thought, well, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I took steps to change careers. I quit my job and I looked around for something else to do with my life. And I got remarried. I had another child, and I took another mediation training. And a friend of mine said to me, Catherine, come take this collaborative law training. And this is in January of 2003. And at the time, collaborative law, and we could talk, Mark, a little bit more about what that is later if you wish. But at the time, it was just lawyers who were committing to work in a mediative kind of setting without litigation. So they were contracted not to litigate. So 100% involved in settlement. And I said to her, Elizabeth, I did that 10 years, same problem, same problem every single case, other lawyer. This is just a bunch of lawyers. It's going to be the same frustrating thing. She goes, no, come take it. And I was like, I don't have anything else better to do. So I took it. And within 15 minutes, Mark, it felt like I was coming home. And I had, this was the way I was always wanted to practice, where the lawyers would get together and work proactively to try to find a collaborative solution that made sense for the people based on what was important to them. Not that the law is irrelevant, but that it isn't necessarily the way that we're going to resolve it. And that's a longer conversation. But I had a new client at the time whose wife didn't even know they were getting divorced yet. And I literally called him from the train on the way back to my office in Westchester. And I was like, Gene, I just took this training. Let's do it this collaborative way. And he was like, okay. And who does that? I mean, really, you can tell I was really enthusiastic because he says, hey, you just paid me a bunch of money to do something that I know how to do. Let's do it this way I don't know how to do. And he goes along with it. That just shows you how enthusiastic I was. Anyway, he said yes. And then I was like, all right, you know what? I can do this. And I got very involved in the collaborative community and very much more involved in the mediation community. And I thought, let's see what I can do to change how people think about divorce and to really focus on the family first, because I do believe that family comes first. I just don't believe that it means that parents who shouldn't be married need to stay married.
Wow. What a story. And which leads me to another question, which is, what exactly is mediation and how does it play a role in collaborative?
Yeah, well, I think that you have to think about the ideas of it, right? So mediation in its purest form, right, is two people who have a dispute, and in this case, let's say a divorce or another kind of family dispute, who come to work with a neutral facilitator, the mediator. And the mediator, like myself, might be a lawyer, but isn't a lawyer for one person against the other or the other way around. That person's job is to help the people gather the information that they need, identify the issues that need to be resolved, talk about what is important to each of them and what their personal criteria are for deciding whether or not something is a good resolution or a bad resolution. And in the field, we often call that interests. So you talk about interest-based negotiation is really talking about a negotiation that's based on what's important to the people. The mediator might inform the people about the law. I think it's always a good idea for people to have lawyers supporting the mediation process so they have an advocate, someone who can help them decide whether or not this is good or not good for them, but really talk that through and inform them about the law. And then the mediator facilitates a sort of negotiation, comparing various options that we come up with in the mediation process against what's possible, right? So, oh, you know what, let's solve the solution by buying lottery tickets. Okay, I guess there's a chance that'll work, but it's not very likely. So we're comparing against reality. And we're also, and maybe more importantly, comparing against what's really important to the people, their interests, so to speak. And through that kind of process of back and forth, what's an option, what's important, what's an option, what's important, work through to a resolution. And that's what mediation is. And that's in its purest form. And sometimes the lawyers come in, and that's totally fine. I think it's really important when the lawyers come into the mediation that the mediation isn't run by the lawyers, that the lawyers are there in a supporting role so that the parties, the people in conflict, come forth and it's really their voices in the room rather than a lawyer speaking for them. And that's again, another conversation. And then the idea of collaborative is to bring that idea of a mediated type solution into the room, but each person has a lawyer. The lawyer is disqualified from litigating. There's no mediator, but the lawyers hold that mediative perspective as well, and thinking, all right, I'm here to represent my client, and I'm thinking about the whole. I'm thinking about the system. I'm thinking about a solution that's going to work for the family. And Mark, before I'm going to breathe in a minute and give you a chance to but I just want to say that one thing that I learned really early in my litigation practice, and that is that the courtroom is a very bad place to find out that the other side has a good point. I'm going to say that again. The courtroom is a bad place to find out that the other side has a good point, which means that in the negotiation process and in this country, 95% of divorces settle before a judge makes a decision after a trial, which means you're going to overwhelmingly likely negotiate a resolution rather than litigate a resolution. So when you're thinking about negotiating a settlement, it's really important to know and appreciate what's important to the other side and see what you can give them in exchange for what's really important for your side, for yourself, for your client.
I think that is a pivot point right there, because the other side, the other person, right, the other human being that you no longer want to be married to, has needs and wants, and in the process, I think so many people end up in litigation, and first of all, they're spending ridiculous amounts of money, ridiculous amounts of time, and just the anguish and angst that comes from that is just family destroying, honestly, from my perspective. But if you're negotiating from a standpoint, understand that this is a human being. I'm a human being. I have needs and wants. They have needs and wants. And so maybe they need something that I don't necessarily want to give them everything that they need and take nothing from myself. That's not what it's about. It is literally a back and forth, a negotiation, a compromise, right? Because I think that's one of the things that so many people that end up in a situation where they're separated or considering divorces, they never really learned how to compromise. They never really learned how to communicate their needs and wants and negotiate within their marriage for what was appropriate. And I've seen you do some videos that talked about some creative ways where you've actually I don't want to say try to convince anybody to not get divorced, but to consider what options might actually be there that are outside the box for staying married. If they want, if everything else were the same, we still love each other. We still we still have kids together. We still really want to be together, but there's something, maybe it's in the bedroom, maybe it's finances, whatever it is, that is, there's just a block there, and maybe there's other solutions. So thank you for bringing that up. And as a matter of full disclosure, we have almost 15 years now of working with divorce mediators, divorce attorneys, et cetera, as part of practice marketing. So my first experience with mediation was with one of our oldest clients, Ada Haslocker, who's a divorce and family mediator in Long Island as well. And she's not an attorney, but in the process of being introduced to that, and then being introduced to the New York State Council of Divorce Mediation, and then the APFM. I can't remember what the acronym means, but I've been immersed in this world, even though I've never been divorced myself. I've been immersed in this world for a long time, and I drank the Kool-Aid for dispute resolution. And I'm deliberately leaving out the term alternative, because I think that the term alternative needs to be eliminated from the vocabulary. I think if the goal is to resolve the dispute, and that is the primary goal, it gives a whole different opening, a whole different playing field to work with, rather than really what people think. I think, and hopefully this is changing, but so many people think that, oh, we're going to court. And it's like, that's the last place that you want to be, both for you, for your soon-to-be ex-spouse, and most importantly, your family.
Yeah.
But,
Mark, you've said so much there, and I know you have a coaching background. So if I could just pick out a couple of things that you said that I think are really worth highlighting. First of all, just on the money versus the anguish. If it costs the same, right, and you had a better outcome, wouldn't that be better anyway? So that two conversations about money and outcome, because if you cost more to get a resolution that felt better to you, was better for your kids, and honored the trajectory of your life, versus blowing it out of the water and leaving you kind of to pick up the pieces later on and figure out what you're going to do next. And wouldn't that be better anyway? So I think it's better value, and it's usually less expensive. So like the two things together, it's like, this is not nuclear waste. It makes so much sense, right? And that's one thing. And another thing is just as if people are listening and thinking, yeah, but we disagree about so much. I mean, they're just, my ex is wrong all the time. I think that one thing that is really an important thing to understand about dispute resolution is that this right-wrong paradox, this right-wrong paradigm is false. That it's right. Like, we're all right about ourselves and our own feelings. And so when you feel like the right-wrong paradigm creates a kind of zero-sum game negotiation. And then when you say compromise, it means, well, then I'm going to get half of what I want, right? I'm going to get, and that's not necessarily true. I think if you think about it more like collaboration, that if you, like Stephen Covey wrote a book called The Third Alternative, and I'm going to give you the cliff notes here. And the third alternative basically says, Mark, if you and I are in a dispute, right, and you have an idea about the best result for you, and I have an idea about the best result for me, if we're willing to basically lay our cards on the table, and I'm willing to tell you what's important to me and what I'm really hoping to gain and why, and you're willing to do the same and bring your story to the table, then working together, we can come to a third alternative, the name of the book, that's better for you than what you thought was the best result, and better for me than what I thought was the best result, because we're working together and we're putting together our ideas. And he's talking about this in any kind of negotiation, buying widgets to serve it, in your computers, whatever it is, that if we're willing to be open and honest, to take the high road in some way, we're going to have a better result than if we got exactly what we wanted when we came in. But I think that's a powerful idea.
And what a great distinction, because we know, those of us that are coaches, et cetera, that 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It's more like 1 × 1 = 4. The fact of the matter is, if you're willing to work together, if you can find a way to work together, that whether that be through a mediator, a collaborative professional, et cetera, that neutral third party, or even if you don't even get to that point, but it's so important to realize that exactly what you said, rather than trying to play three-dimensional chess or some sort of poker game or something like that with each other, where you're holding your hand, you're holding back information because you think that if you put that information out there, that it's going to get used against you. Well, if you can agree to not use it against each other, but to actually look at, okay, how can you get more and I get more than if we're standing on opposite sides and throwing spears at each other, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's a risk benefit analysis. And if you think, okay, people are like, well, it's risky to reveal myself. Well, it's risky not to. It's risky not to. So that it's not that you're protecting yourself. And if you go into any negotiation from a point of view of just being protective, that's a bad strategy. But I think anybody, and this might sound a little self-promoting, anybody who's getting divorced or facing any kind of negotiation or dispute where relationships matter, right? When you're engaging an attorney or a mediator, you should ask that person about what their strategy is, because you want to make sure that the strategy is in alignment with your goals. Right? If they have a strategy that's not in alignment with your goals, you're definitely not going to be happy.
Absolutely. And if I can, I'm going to take just a bit of a turn, because a lot of people may not know what video socials is, what practice marketing is, and you've been a client for a long time and a cherished one, frankly. We've learned a lot from you, and hopefully we've been of service to you. But rather than get into all the different things that we can do, one of the things that you do a lot of is video socials. And I want to ask you, what is video socials for you? How do you use it? What is it? What benefits do you see out of it? And what difference does it make on your own? Because you were doing a lot on your own before you became a video social.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. Let me just talk about the benefit of video a little bit. For me, the idea of sitting down and writing a blog just fills me with dread. I'm a good writer and I have good ideas and I can do it, but I don't enjoy it. And if someone is listening to this and they enjoy doing that, great, you should do that. I like to talk about what it is that I'm passionate about. And I find that I'm pretty articulate about it. And as I do it more, I find that it's easier and it's better, and I say better things. And sometimes I even surprise myself, right? I was like, wow, Katherine, that was pretty good. Other times, I'm like, oh, maybe that wasn't so good. But, as a general rule, it helps my thought process to put it out there in video. And maybe I don't use every single one, but the ideas, does this make sense for people? And I think that it's consumed very differently if people have the opportunity. And, for me, what I do is I just have the videos also have a, like transcription on the bottom, so people could choose to read it in case they're on the train or whatever and they don't want to listen. But it really helps me get my message out there. And as you can tell, I have a lot to say. So that's one piece about the video socials, just what the product is. But the thing about the structure of video socials is that it's every week. So every week I'm coming to, or more or less, to the same group of people that I've gotten to be, I feel really quite friendly with over the period of time, the couple of years I've been doing it. I refer to them, they refer to me, but it's more of a friendship even than just a referral network. But I feel a commitment to the group. And I'm not saying, oh my God, I'm at the doctor's office. Sorry, doctor, I'm not going to see you now. I'm going to, go do my video socials or don't go on vacation. Then it's a general regular rule. I'm going to come to my time and I'm going to see my friends and you, and I'm going to do my video. And that structure just fits into my regular life, just as a regular thing, so that the videos get done, so that the message gets out there, so that my marketing team has video that they can work with and utilize in trying to get our message out in the world.
Fantastic. And you basically just outlined everything that we were trying to invent when we invented it, because it is a community. And so for any viewers out there that may want to experiment with, or maybe you're already doing some video, but you'd like to have that weekly accountability, you'd like to have that feedback of others that are doing the same thing as you, so that you get different perspectives and you can get practiced at having a conversation with an audience rather than speaking to an inanimate object called the camera.
And let me just say, I do other videos, Mark. I do lengthier videos. I do videos that we embed in email and nurture campaigns, and I do brand videos. But doing the video on a weekly basis, it just makes me better. It makes me more relaxed and just much more comfortable in front of the camera. And plus I get hints and ideas from other people in the group.
Outstanding. And so if you'd like to sample that experience, you're welcome to come as a guest. Go to videosocials.net and then just click on the guest tab at the top of the screen. But coming back to this whole thing, mediation, litigation, collaboration, how does somebody decide? Do I need a mediator? Do I need an attorney litigator? Do I need to look at collaborative law? Under what circumstances would I make those kinds of choices? Because they have a lot of choices, including do it yourself, which is another thing. I think that
exactly. I mean, I think that, what I tell people is that there's a continuum of process choices, hows, and frankly, perhaps the most important decision that anybody is going to make once they decide to divorce or decide that they need some kind of help is how they're going to make the decisions that need to be made. Because again, as I said, the chances are overwhelmingly likely that you are going to make those decisions with help. So don't think, oh my gosh, we can't talk in the kitchen even about whether or not to have, caffeinated coffee or decaf coffee. I mean, like, we can't, how are we going to agree on anything? You're not going to be on your own. So the continuum starts at do it yourself. And a lot of times people will say to me, oh, well, I had a starter marriage, or, I was married when I was young and we got divorced after a few years and we just did it ourselves. And then they usually laugh right there because it was way simpler then. They didn't have kids. They didn't have anything. They had, they had to decide how to split up their wedding china, and that was pretty much it. And it wasn't a lifetime together. So, usually when I start talking to clients, if you were a client, they'd start be going like, I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. And frankly, I couldn't do it on my own. And when I got divorced, I've been married 10 years. I had 2 kids. It was very high conflict. And this is what I do for a living. And I couldn't do it on my own. That doesn't mean that there aren't things you can do on your own, right? So it can be that you decide how you're going to split up your furniture on your own. It might be that you decide on the kids' vacation schedule on your own. So that to say that you choose another path doesn't mean you're not going to be able to do some things on your own. So I just want to make that point. Then, there's mediation, there's collaboration, and then there's litigation, just sort of along the lines of where you are. And so I think that people can stay out of the courtroom for family disputes. It's a good idea because the courtroom structure was just not put into place, and it's a bad match for families. That's why I did the mediation training early on. And it's just the timing is off, the terror is off, the anxiety is off, the hijacking, and giving over decisions about your life to somebody who's really a stranger in a black robe is, kind of distasteful to many people, especially when those decisions are around your children. So, but I'm not here to bash litigation because it's appropriate in some circumstances. What are those circumstances? If you cannot get the other person to do anything, the only way you're going to get them to do something is to at least start a litigation, right? Because some people need the discipline of the courtroom. Some people do. And if you are in a situation that requires that situation, then that's what you should do. And that's what I tell my clients too. We're not here to bash litigation. It's right for some circumstances. That's one of them. Another one, domestic violence of a serious nature. It's a very controversial topic because getting an order of protection, a piece of paper, does not stop someone from shooting you or stabbing you. It just is supposed to keep them away from you. It doesn't always work. You see articles in the paper every month about people who got killed or hurt very badly with an order of protection in their purse, or their wallet. And so it's not perfect. But putting people together in the same room or putting people in a consensual dispute resolution process where one person has a lot of power over the other might not be appropriate, and that should be seriously looked at. And the third place in which you should really seriously consider litigation is getting information that you wouldn't otherwise get. So if you need the subpoena power, right, you need a court order to get documentation from a third party, then you might, and I'm going to emphasize might, want to consider litigation as an option. But I'm not saying that it's the only option because a couple of things. One, a liar is a liar and a cheat is a cheat. And that person is going to be able to hide information from a court, not just in a negotiation. So if someone's got an offshore account in the Cayman Islands or something like that, and they've hidden it well, which most people don't, but they've hidden it well, it's going to stay hidden. And I'm sorry, there's just nothing. The court doesn't have a crystal ball, and there's no sort of God's eye view of the truth on this. Right. And another sort of caveat about that is I have found that in mediation and in collaborative law, people are much more willing to disclose maybe shady business practices. Maybe they're, a judge has a duty to report unreported taxes to the IRS. Do they do it? Not much, I don't think, but they have a duty to do it. And if you're staying in mediation, you're staying in collaborative, you're staying in an entirely private process. So if there's something that seems a little shady or a little off color, sometimes people are just a lot more willing to disclose it, like a cash business or something like that, in an out of court setting. So then, another thing that you want to think about is how much support do you feel like you need? Some people I want to negotiate for myself. I know it's important to me. I want to stay in control of this. We need a little bit of help in having those difficult conversations. Then you're going to be sort of on the other end of the spectrum, Mark, right? You're going to want to be like, oh, let's work with a mediator. Let's get this, some information about the law. But I know it's important to me, and I want to speak for myself. And I feel like we can do that together. Other people sort of have to find yourselves along that spectrum. It sometimes, I think back to my kind of like my dating days. It was just a lot easier to go to a party. If I brought a friend, I felt more outgoing. I felt more confident. I felt like, oh, I have someone to go home with, that I know what it's going to be. Not that I was going to parties to hook up with other people, but, I had a friend, somebody to have my back. Right. And so if you want to work with an attorney to have your back, do you want to do that in the mediation process where you're speaking a lot for yourself? Do you want to make sure they're there at every single meeting in the collaborative process? Or do you want to have them kind of take over the entire conversation more in a litigation type negotiation? And so, I'm just going to say two more things about that. If you're listening and you're thinking, well, it'd be a lot easier if the attorney just took over for me. Yes, that will be easier, but the result won't be as customized to you, right? So you have to think about how important that is. And then think about what help you could get to make you feel stronger, and how you might feel if you were able to speak for yourself and be heard by your partner in a different way than what you're used to, because that's the purpose of these other dispute resolution processes.
In a way, mediation, collaborative, which has kind of mediation at the core, or the concepts of mediation at the core, become empowering versus the disempowerment of handing it all over to the attorneys and the judge.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, again, sometimes you need that structure and sometimes you don't.
Absolutely perfect. So thank you so much, Katherine. And I know that you had somebody that you wanted to give a shout out to, Michelle Smith, and she's a financial advisor and mediator.
Yeah. So Michelle is a friend of mine as well as a colleague, to go back to your introduction of me. And she has founded something called Wife to CFO. And it is a really terrific program. And she has some men, but for a general rule, she's working with, and it's an online program, sort of, I think you go at your own pace, where particularly women who have been not in control of the family finances, not the family CFO, learn about money, learn about budgeting. I don't love that word because it sounds like dieting. It's not about restriction. It's about allocating your resources so that you get to continue to live the life that you want to live. About investing your money so you can talk to your investment advisor, again, about empowerment. You're not just handing your portfolio over to someone and say, okay, make sure I get, this much money a month or whatever. You're saying, okay, let's be involved in those decisions and really understand what they're about. And when we talk about inflation, what's all that? And maybe this seems really simple, but a lot of people feel super overwhelmed by it. And when you're leaving a marriage and you've got a portfolio and you're going to be relying on these assets that you're taking out of the marriage to support you for the rest of your life, I think it's really important to understand what that means and how it works. And this program really does that for people. And I really applaud Michelle for putting it together. And my clients who've used it have really been helped.
Fantastic. And look forward to meeting her. And perhaps having a conversation with her on this podcast, because it sounds like she too is trying to make a difference for those that you serve. So that's fantastic. So Katherine, how do people reach you? Now we're going to have links, associated with however you're consuming this podcast, whether it be on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms, et cetera. But what's the best way, one, to be able to reach you if they want to have a conversation with you? And two is, how can they learn more? Because you've put a lot of content out through a lot of different channels.
Yeah. So, of course, there's our website, which is www.miller-law.com, miller-law.com. We have a lot of videos there, and we have podcasts and blogs and a tremendous amount of material, downloadable PDFs, all kinds of things. I would also invite people to my podcast, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Which is called Divorce Dialogues. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, but it's also on the podcast website, which is divorcedialogues.com. I've been doing Divorce Dialogues on every other week for 9 years. It's ridiculous. I can't believe that that's happened. And we've interviewed people from all over the world and in all different areas on divorce-related topics. So we've had, obviously, divorce coaches, financial experts. We've had negotiation experts like Chris Voss, who wrote Never Split the Difference, which is a terrific book on negotiation, and other people like that. We've talked with people who've been through the divorce process and about their experiences. And I think that for people who are thinking about or in the middle of divorce, there's a tremendous amount of resources there and information from all different kinds of experts, not just me.
Outstanding. So we will absolutely include links to those in association with this. And Katherine, thank you again. I mean, it feels, in some ways, it may feel a little bit like drinking from a fire hose and having a conversation with you like this. But this was a lot of information. This was incredibly valuable information, and I think incredibly important to start to distinguish. And I love the way that you define the differences on that continuation curve, as it were. So do it yourself all the way up to, standing and fighting it out in court, and what circumstances people might find themselves or insert themselves into that process. And I think it's important too to realize that even if you choose, no matter which you choose to, where you choose to step in at, you can go up or down. You can move around. Is it not true that if somebody goes, the full litigation route and then realizes, oh, well, we don't really need to stay in this, they can settle at any point, right? So
absolutely. And we get cases like that in mediation all the time. People are like, oh my gosh, we were really pissed off when we came in. This is the path we chose, but this isn't working for us. We need to do something different.
Terrific. Well, thank you again. Thank you for being a Video Socials members and sharing your experience with that with us. And thank you for making the difference that you make for the clients that you serve. Again, I'm Mark Bullock, a co-founder of videosocials.net, also phoneblogger.net, and most recently, videointerviewpodcast.com. Have a great day, everybody.
You've been listening to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing this show with others. You can catch prior episodes on www.videosocials.net and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.